While Western analysts are celebrating what they call the fractures inside BRICS, 4 Indian ships carrying LPG just sailed safely out of the Strait of Hormuz. A new blockchain payment app is threatening to bury the dollar. Ethiopian coffee is tripling its exports to Russia, and New Delhi is preparing the most consequential BRICS summit in history. The mainstream story is BRICS is falling apart. The real story. BRICS just showed the world exactly how a new order operates under pressure. Let me break down why this matters for BRICS power. I am Anastasia from Think BRICS. We study geopolitics not just to understand the world, but to become sharper, more informed people who can help others see through the noise. Because every week, newspaper headlines say one thing, while the flow of information and the facts tell a different story. Let's bridge this gap together. Today, we cover 4 critical BRICS developments from the past week. 1. The May Ministerial. How India is turning BRICS' biggest stress test into its greatest proof of resilience. 2. The BRICS Way in Hormuz. How India got 4 ships full of LPG safely home without a single soldier. 3. De-dollarization defiance. Why a blockchain app and a 56% reserve share are more dangerous to Washington than any army. 4. Africa's BRICS momentum. Ethiopia's 435 million US dollars trade surge and Angola knocking on the NDB's door. Let's dive in. In mid-March 2026, India, serving as this year's BRICS chair, issued formal invitations for a high-level foreign ministers meeting scheduled for May. This gathering is the strategic warm-up act for the 18th BRICS Summit expected in New Delhi on September 9th through 13th, 2026. Dates must be confirmed, where the guest list alone tells the whole story. Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and leaders from Brazil, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE, all under one roof in a city that refuses to take sides. Now, Western media has zeroed in on the tension between 2 of those names, Iran and the UAE. Following the February 28th killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei, the region is, to put it gently, not calm. And yes, forging a joint statement that satisfies both Tehran and Abu Dhabi is difficult. But here is what mainstream missed. The fact that both Iran and the UAE are still coming to New Delhi, still sitting at the same table in person, not online, it is not a sign of weakness. It is the entire point of BRICS. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the May meeting will provide, and I quote, a good opportunity for thorough discussion, current issues, and opportunities for joint action. The G7 demands ideological lockstep. BRICS operates on consensus. The bloc has 10 member nations, each with distinct national interests. The model does not require unanimity, it requires dialogue. And dialogue under the heaviest geopolitical pressure in years is exactly what's happening. The September summit is not just a calendar event. It is a declaration that the multipolar world has an institutional home, and that home is in New Delhi. Did you catch that? Because now the real story gets even more concrete. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and roughly 20% of the world's oil transits through it every single day. Following the escalation of the West Asia war, Iran restricted transit through the strait to, and this is their exact language, friendly nations. China, Russia, Iraq, Pakistan, and India were named as partners who respect Iranian sovereignty. That left approximately 20 Indian-flagged merchant vessels carrying oil, natural gas, and LPG liquefied petroleum gas effectively trapped. Now, step back. What is the real leverage here? The West's traditional playbook in this scenario has one move: military coalition, threat of force, and the implicit open the route or we will open it for you. In 2026, that playbook costs 15 US troops wounded in the regional strikes and a global economy that is, quote, spooked. India played an entirely different game. New Delhi dispatched humanitarian aid to Tehran. Not cash, not weapons, medicine. Life-saving medicine as a gesture of what their foreign policy apparatus is calling civilizational links between the two nations. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar spoke to his Iranian counterpart half a dozen's time. Prime Minister Modi engaged the Iranian president directly. The result: 4 ships laden with LPG exited the strait safely and reached Indian ports. Behind the headlines, this is a masterclass in what BRICS-style diplomacy actually looks like in practice. For every nation in the global south watching this play out, the contrast could not be more stark. The West offers ground troops and toll booths. BRICS offers dialogue, medicine, and the safe flow of energy. If you are finding this breakdown useful, and I think you are, hit subscribe. It literally tells YouTube's algorithm that this kind of analysis matters. If you want to support us more, think of a super thanks or a donation. Links are in the description. Let's back to the news. Who really wins from the BRICS diplomatic model, and how do you pay for a new world order? In July 2025, Donald Trump issued what analysts have called a trade fatwa, threatening 100% tariffs on any nation that moves to undermine the US dollar's role as the global reserve currency. Strong words. Now, look at what happened anyway. India is increasingly settling oil trades with Russia and Iran in local currencies, specifically the Chinese yuan and the UAE dirham. This shift accelerated directly after 2022, when Western sanctions demonstrated just how vulnerable to economic sanctions dollar-dependent emerging markets truly are. 70% down to 56% in 2 decades, and US national debt has now crossed 39 trillion US dollars. But here is the development that very few Western analysts are talking about. At the 3rd Smart Cities Forum in New Delhi, held just days ago, India and Russia presented the BRICS Pay app to the world. BRICS Pay is a blockchain-based payment system designed for instant cross-border transactions between bloc members. It integrates Brazil's PIX, Russia's SPFS, and India's UPI into a single, seamless financial bridge, eliminating the need for SWIFT and, by extension, eliminating one of Washington's most powerful economic weapons. This echoes what BRICS began building after 2022, the quiet, methodical construction of financial infrastructure immune to Western pressure. What was once a theory, what if the global south simply opted out, is now an app being demoed at a Smart Cities Forum. And there is context here. India's Smart Cities mission has completed 94% of its planned initiatives, with over 1.5 lakh crore invested. Embedding BRICS Pay into that urban architecture doesn't just make these cities technologically advanced, it makes them economically sovereign. The informal Petro-Dollar agreement with Saudi Arabia is ending. Central banks globally are now holding more gold than US Treasury bills. The de-dollarization isn't coming, it is here. Now, if you want to understand where BRICS momentum is building fastest, look at Africa. Ethiopia has been a BRICS member for just 3 years. In 2025, its bilateral trade with Russia surged to over 435 million US dollars, nearly tripling the previous year's figures. Ethiopian coffee exports to Russia alone jumped from 46 million to 123 million US dollars. Russia, in return, is sending fertilizers and energy equipment, the inputs a developing agricultural economy actually needs to industrialize. But it goes deeper than trade. During high-level talks in Addis Ababa on March 26, agreements were reached to establish Russian manufacturing facilities inside Ethiopia's special economic zones. The focus: technology transfer in pharmaceuticals, unmanned technologies, and energy equipment. This is the model. Not loans with conditions, not aid with strings, technology transfer, and joint production on Ethiopian soil. And the wave is spreading. On March 25th, Angola's finance minister Vera Davis de Souza met with New Development Bank President Dilma Rousseff in Shanghai. Rousseff positioned the NDB explicitly as a, quote, strategic alternative for financing infrastructure in the global south. Angola is now being actively encouraged to formally join the BRICS Bank, access to non-conditional development funding that doesn't come with IMF-style austerity attached. And then there was a vote at the United Nations General Assembly. 123 nations, the Global South, voted to formally condemn the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity and called for reparative justice. The United States, Israel, and Argentina voted against. Europe abstained. Washington's justification: slavery was, and I want to be precise here, not a crime at the time due to a lack of international law. For the 123 nations on the other side of that vote, that was not a footnote. It was a civilizational confirmation. BRICS speaks the language of humanity first. The West increasingly does not. If this continues, and the institutional momentum strongly suggests it will project out 12 to 24 months, by the end of 2027, the New Delhi Summit will have established an official roadmap for the BRICS financial architecture. BRICS Pay will be operational in at least 6 economies within the bloc. Angola and likely 2 or 3 other African nations will have secured a place within the New Development Bank. And what about the dollar's reserve share? It will quietly slip toward 50%. Who gains? The Global South's development trajectory accelerates. BRICS institutional credibility hardens from perception to infrastructure. India cements its role as the bloc's indispensable diplomatic convener. Who loses? The dollar's structural leverage over energy and trade corridors, the foundation of US foreign policy since 1973, continues to erode quietly and without a single summit declaring it so. Let me bring this together. This week, 4 ships carried LPG safely home through a hostile strait with medicine, not missiles. A blockchain app quietly began dismantling the architecture of dollar dependency. A manufacturing agreement was signed in Addis Ababa that no Western outlet covered. And 123 nations cast a vote that told you exactly where the world's moral center of gravity now sits. None of this was loud, none of it made the front page. That's the thing about structural change. It rarely announces itself. It accumulates, it compounds. And then one day, the world you thought you understood has already become something else. BRICS isn't a story about governments or summits or currencies. At its core, it's a story about people. Billions of them deciding that development, dignity, and self-determination are worth building for. So the question I will leave you with isn't about BRICS at all. It's simpler than that. What are you building, and who does it serve? Think about it. Thanks for watching.